Welcome to the Grow Fast podcast, where we talk with leading sales, marketing, and personal growth experts about how companies can accelerate sales, optimize marketing, and grow their businesses fast. Let's go. Hey, Nick, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Mark. And yourself?
Awesome. It's a beautiful sunny day here in the Seattle area. I'm technically in Bellevue, but anytime the sun's out, it's a big bonus for us here. Whereabouts you located?
So I'm outside Chicago, Illinois, in a suburb. With that is 20 minutes away, 24 on the express train when I used to have an office in the city. And it's, I'm a cliche. It's a town I grew up in, right? So it's like 4 generations live in this town. It's the beginning of the North Shore of suburbs of Park. So it's a lot of fun. And it's sunny here in Chicago. And we also, just get a handful of days. It's May as we're recording this, so it could snow tomorrow here, right? We don't know. But,
isn't that crazy, man?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So you've been in that town or that area for a long time. Is it like when you walk down the street, do you see people you know?
I see people I know everywhere. My poor wife, who married into this community, my mom teases her that she can't go to the store without makeup. We run into people all the time. It's very provincial, right? 2 Starbucks, right? So we're well, you're in Seattle, so you got a Starbucks, probably in your driveway, but
every corner, yeah,
every corner, it's everything here. So we see people all the time at the library, there's a beautiful uptown area. We're blessed, people we play golf with. So it's when my kids are older, but they went to the same high school. They did not go to the same junior high or grade school. I went to a different one in this community, but in the high school, so it was always eerie. Like you'd be there on parent teacher days and week, days. And, the kid that was the goof off, his dad is still the goof off, right? The cheerleader still acts like the cheerleader, the jock still acts like the jock. And we don't evolve that much through high school. I like to think that I did, but when they probably say the same thing. It's also really funny when you would go to like somebody's barbecue or a party, or like the kids take a lot of pictures for the homecoming dance or the proms or all that. And you'd be standing in a house. You're like, I think I was here in a party in high school. It's just,
wow.
So it was like deja vu all over again. But hey, we love it. It's a good community, and we raised our family, and we've been very lucky. And my parents are in the same house that I grew up in. So we see them, once, twice, 3 times a week. So I'm blessed.
That's awesome. And I really appreciate that sense of community. We have some people in our neighborhood that have been living here for close to 40 years, and they walk their dogs 3 times. And there's a fair amount of continuity and community here. There's also a lot of people who are new to the area. Yeah. But I've been in areas where nobody knows anybody. And then I've been in areas like when we lived in Japan where everybody knew everybody because they were all going to the same schools, same sports clubs and everything like that. And I really like it when you walk out in the street and say, hey. But I can commiserate with, the whole thing about having to, make yourself presentable because you never know who you're going to run into. So it's, part and parcel. Hey, Nick, you have a tremendous amount of experience in sales leadership, working with SMBs, enterprise as well. And I want to talk to you about one of the, kind of increasingly more powerful trends, which is outsourcing sales and sales leadership, from all the way from just, lead development, to up towards, fractional CROs. But before we do that, you worked as president for GKIC, and you were with them during that transition to magnetic marketing. So maybe as a kind of like level set to talk about where you came from, talk a little bit about what GKIC was, what you were doing there, and then the transition to magnetic marketing.
Sure. Well, thanks for that. And you're very kind. GKIC was a community-based organization, let's call it in the marketing and education space. So we worked with, entrepreneurs, small business owners, professional service firms, you name it, and did a bunch of different levels of education on everything from lead generation to sales conversion, right? And that's where we were. We were private equity owned. It was started by 2 gentlemen, first gentleman that started was Dan Kennedy, right? Kind of a thought leader still to this day, still very active. And the gentleman by the name of Bill Glazer, who was a really phenomenal entrepreneur. And Bill was the driving force, right? So that's the G and the K in GKIC. And Bill was really the driving force and really had his pulse on early adoption to all things internet, all things lead conversion, really how to create a full cycle sales and marketing system for small business owners. And we weren't into branding, right? So we were really what works, right? So what worked from a lead generation perspective? How do you conversion? How do you create long form copy that converts, webinars, all the things that people do today? We created an arm that we called information marketing. Today it's called content marketing, right? So we really were big on content first to drive inbound leads for people. And so that was kind of our space. It got acquired in probably 2011 by private equity. So 4 different private equity firms were bidding on it, as well as some online education companies were bidding on it. And what we found was a lot of people wanted to talk to us once the conversion happened because we had access to small businesses. And a lot of enterprise companies wanted to get in and sell to small businesses, but it's like herding cats, right? They're all over. It's tough to keep their attention. So we, at our highest, had a community of about 13,000 that were paying us some level of fee. We probably had a list of 150,000 plus, maybe, that were actively engaged on our list. We do events. We did 2 large events that had anywhere from 500 people to 750 people, right? Depending on the time of year and just kind of where the economy was. And so we were kind of a full-fledged, marketing education company, built on the personalities of people, which made it kind of a push-pull and difficult for the private equity firm, right? Because the private equity firm, the members had an affinity. The private equity firm wants the exit, right? So they're looking out on saying, okay, 3 to 5 years, 5 to 7 years, right? We got to get our money out. First money in is first money out type things with the primary investors, the PIs. And so, it was just, an interesting thing to watch that. They were a great firm. They're a firm out of Evanston, Illinois, Silver Oak Partners, great firm, really great businessmen. I learned a lot from them. I learned a lot from the board. So that was a lot of fun. I was hired as the director of sales, and I had just finished, I just had a marketing agency that we kind of built from the ground up and sold. I had angel investors. I had some partners in it, and we had done it for 6 years. It was time for people to kind of get their money out. Has anything with partners, everybody was kind of tired of each other. I take responsibility in that just as much as everybody else. So I'm not throwing stones in any way, shape, or form. And so there was a recruiter doing a recruitment for a firm that was blind, right? To me, but it was GKIC. And I always liked the content marketing, that type of thing. And I really thought that was where it was going. HubSpot was just kind of coming. Inbound, I don't even think was around, or maybe was just in its beginning phases out in Boston. And the whole content event, kind of community marketing, I really wanted to learn. And so when they made me the offer, I jumped on it. I was still exiting out of the business, right? We wanted to, make a good transition for the people that were buying our business. So they were really fair to me. I had to, kind of ease my way in, was the director of sales, became the VP of sales, and then became the president, right? And it was interesting because we, as private equity, right, we had a lot of people in the C-suite kind of come and go over the course of time, just because it's just the nature of the business. So I kind of was the last man standing. So maybe that's why I was like president, right? They just like, let's give the kid the keys, right? Because he's the one that's still around. And so we, Silver Oak owned us, then a mezzanine, investment company and lending company who had a piece of a loan ended up owning us also. They wanted to kind of get into the private equity space. Then they realized we don't want to be in this business. It's just easier to lend out money at a very high interest rate. So let's just stay into that. They then sold us to a private publisher that that published vanity books, right? So you see people that kind of go out, use what you call them lead generation books. So it was a good match because we told people this is one of the things that you should do. So entrepreneurs that want to tell their story, financial planners that want to position themselves, lawyers, you name it, they should write a book. And that's really a good form of, and a platform for positioning. So they owned us. It was the beginning of COVID, right? Or it was just, their core business wasn't as steady maybe as it was, and it kind of went through some peaks and valleys. So they then they did the rename into Magnetic. They called it something else, and they renamed it to Magnetic Marketing, and then they sold it to a SaaS company by the name of ClickFunnels, who owns it. Yeah. So if you're in the SaaS marketing space, you're in the marketing space, ClickFunnels, they have a large event. He actually, was kind of an acolyte of it. So it's a good fit, right? He, I don't know if he talks about this publicly, but you could figure out in a SaaS company, churn is their issue, right? So, you get people in, it's easy to get people in. A lot of times they get in, they get bought in, they're like, this is too tough. We don't want it. Maybe they start in on a free trial. They don't stick around. So he wanted content to kind of keep people, engaged. And so it was a huge body of work that we had. And so it's probably a good fit. I was just in it kind of from all those exits. I had a business plan of something that I wanted to kind of do. I'd, done everything I wanted to do in the business. So I stayed on for the last transition and then jettisoned out and formed my company. But, if people are listening, it's a fun journey, right? And we could go deeper into it all you can. It is it's faster to scale a company that's built around a personality. It's difficult to exit a company that's built around a personality, right? Because of the fact that once the personality's gone, people lose an affinity. And so it was a struggle that we had to deal with every day, especially a personality that has a strong personality. And for every person that he or she attracts, they may repel 2 to 3 people just because of the personality. And that's great for a very niche business. It's great, but private equity doesn't want to sit in a niche business that's going to sit around 12 million. They want to get their money out and they want to get a 3 times, 4 times, or 8 times earnings. So, we had to grow the business. And so therefore we had to bring other personalities into it, bring other services into it. And so we're always trying different things, and always trying different services.
Well, it sounds like an amazing learning opportunity, professional development opportunity. And I have just a couple more questions on this topic, and then we'll move into what you're doing right now with your company. I've read stuff from Dan Kennedy, and it could be 10 years old, but I still find a lot of profound information there. And I often think, where does a guy like him or Bill, where do they go to learn? I mean, because you're out there at the front. You're kind of trying to anticipate where the market's going, so what would be their process to kind of continually stay ahead of the curve?
They were huge, input. Right. So they read the body of work that Dan would read would be amazing. I think he told me at one time he had over 30 different newsletters per se coming to his house. Right. So, and sometimes they were specific for industries that he had clients in, but he was a huge consumer of information. Bill also. Bill was a huge consumer of information, and probably, Bill jumped into the affiliate marketing space, if you will, right? So, if in traditional business, it would be a reseller space, right? So people that were kind of selling it, he got into that, and he was really also the catapult into the digital online advertising and really figuring that out and moving that through. But, the other thing too that Dan and Bill both had was a number of private clients that would come to them from a consulting perspective. And so they would learn from them as well as from their staff what was going on, right? Because if you do any studies, and you're a student of Dan Kennedy, and he's, still a prolific just a prolific thinker. And a lot of that is he was grounded in what works, right? If you think about David Ogilvy, let's just jump to David and then I'll go back to Dan. David Ogilvy was a student of direct response advertising, right? And Ogilvy and Mather had a very big direct response area, right? Division. And that they knew what worked because of that. They tested what worked because of that. If you think about Dan, his biggest client, probably individual client, is, considered us a client right after the sale, was Gunther Renker, one of the largest direct response infomercial business. So by being in that business as a copywriter, but also as a marketing strategist, and just having kind of looking behind the wheel, knew what was moving. And because he's educated as a, greatly educated man, self-taught, right? But also educated as a copywriter, they are always 3 steps ahead of trends because they know that they have to write to those trends, right? So what is going on in the marketplace today? What are conversations going on in yours and I's head of who I'm selling to? And he would always say that, the research portion of the work that he did was the most important. And he never told me, but he probably had teams of people that would be doing the research and then send him that information and he would just consume it. So the getting ready for a marketing campaign, getting ready for a copywriting campaign, getting ready for anything, it was the hours and hours and hours of consumption of research before he knew where that was going. And he had a body of work and longevity that he's able to kind of pull from to say, these are, this is where it's going. We also live in we don't know our history, so we repeat itself and we go through trends, right? And today's marketplace, if you look at, I was just talking about this with my wife and, we'll use a consumer, it's very similar to what was going on in the 80s, right? If you look at the way that dresses, fluorescent colors, the shoe styles, it's the 80s. There's stuff going on political campuses, right? Political unrest on campuses, very similar to the 60s, right? So we kind of go through ebbs and flows, as society, especially here in the United States. And, that's most of my work. And so that's the area that I have. So, he was a great student of human behavior. And, he always used to say, hey, marketing is nothing more than human behavior and math. And you just put the two together and you'll win, right? And also having that body of work and all those different customers and clients that you could kind of pull from and see, I think just made him better, right? He wasn't in one industry. He was in 15 different industries and you could kind of piecemeal everything together. How's that for a long answer to a short question?
No, it's great. And it aligns with something that I kind of preach to everybody, which is I don't care, where you sit in the business, you need to get out and talk to customers. And because, you can go and subscribe to newsletters and you can read books. But you also, by talking with customers and understanding their challenges, you can understand. And if you got, you talk to 5 customers and 3 of them or 4 of them have the same challenge, you're like, okay, here's an opportunity here. Here's a trend here. Right. And I know people who run companies, but do not interact with customers. And, and I'm like, you need to be, especially in those higher level meetings, right? I mean, you need to be there because otherwise you're getting information just kind of filtered down through the team. So I think that's hugely important. And the fact that he continued to manage his own clients or customers, he had some very intimate relationships there. That's really important. On that same kind of theme of learning from customers, you guys, you said like 11,000 SMB subscribers, or it was 14,000.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would think that you would be able to glean a tremendous amount of information about some of the sales and marketing related challenges that SMBs across America face. And maybe you can talk a little bit about that. What were the challenges 10 years ago? What are the challenges today for the SMB market?
Well, it's the driver of the company, right? And so I'll get into that a little bit later, but let me tell you. So listen, first off, always still struggling with a good, one is a dangerous, Dan always taught and still does to this day, one is a dangerous number in any business, right? So if you only have one form of lead generation, you're going to be in trouble, right? Because eventually that lead generation is going to go away. Whether it's, I'm going to date myself, whether it's fax machines, right? Or before the DNR call.
I've done that, by the way.
Right, me too, right?
I had a thing. It was like, I know if I send 50 faxes, I would get 3 to 5 responses, and I would be able to close 2 or 3 of those. And it was just a number. I'd get up every morning, and that's what I would do.
Right. And just like dials, right? So I would make the old thing was 30, 10, 1, right? So 30 dials, right? You'd get 10 people that you could talk to, have a conversation with, and one of them would book an appointment, right? And so you just knew the math, right? Or 10-3-1 was it 10-3-1. Now it's higher, right? So it's a little bit higher because you have to put more, it's tougher to get a hold of people. They're not in offices anymore. More people are on cell phones, even in the business environment. So the numbers don't lie, right? And so you knew your numbers. And so that's one of the things that he taught is you just kind of get schooled in that. And that's one of the things that we would teach people. So the struggles that business owners had, we had, first off, message to market match, right? And the first thing we would say is, hey, listen, if everybody is your customer, nobody's your customer, right? Because they all don't have the same problems and solutions. So you have to be intimate in knowing your market. If you know your market, then you could formulate the messaging for that market of what keeps them up, what's their pain, right? Problem, agitate, solve. And then now you could get to the tactical thing. The tactical thing will change. You and I talked about fax machines, right? That's a tactic, right? But it wasn't the fax machine. It was the good copy that you wrote. It was the letter that you wrote to the right audience that got them to pick up the phone or that got them to scribble a response and fax it back to you. Say, yes, I'd like to meet with you. Well, that's the same thing, right? So we'll rush to email marketing because that's like the new wave, and AI email marketing, right? And listen, I have it running for myself and I have it running for customers. So I'm not damning it. I'm just saying that's a tactic, but it has to be really, really good messaging to the right avatar ICP market, right? So pick your market, find out what their problem is. Now, then figure out the problem and then find solutions to those markets. And that's something that you said, hey, you got to be talking to your customers so you know what their problem is, because maybe you're going to have a product line extension to solve that problem because you're having those conversations with people. So that's the one thing to this day that I don't think people do enough with, right? Especially founders, I think they get married in the technology, they get married in the solution, and they don't have those conversations. And then they're wondering why things aren't converting. We do a lot of work with founders, and we were usually brought in because their sales aren't conversion. Well, the first thing is it's maybe not a problem fit, right? Product problem fit. The messaging may be off, right? And so we have to kind of work on those things. But everybody runs to tactics today. Is it SEO, right? Is it webinars? Webinars work, webinars don't work. It all works and it doesn't work. It's just really one is the testing? What are the numbers? Are you ROI positive? The other thing too is, do you have back ends, right? Do you have other products and services that you could sell? Because we would go negative on the acquiring of that customer, right? So the subscriber, the person that was part of our community, we would go negative to the tune of, a couple $100 of that. But we knew, one is we had a very good sales team, that could sell them products and services that we were able to kind of upsell them into different things. And then we eventually knew for every, $7 that we spent on Facebook, we could get, 350 back or something of that nature, right? So it was just, we were blessed to have private equity money. So we just, were able to spend. So the problem that customers have that you were saying is they underestimate how much it will cost to acquire a customer. They underestimate the length of time of conversion for customers. And I've made that mistake myself, right? Of where you think it's going to be 30-day conversion. Well, really the buying cycle is 90 days or 120 days or even longer, right? So how much cash do we have to fold that? We have a product that we become enamored with or a service that we become enamored with, but the marketplace doesn't want it. Right. Or the problem isn't big enough right now for them. So therefore, they're not going to make the investment. They have other problems and services that they need to go. And those problems are still the same, and it hasn't changed in business. Right. We had a lot of early stage entrepreneurs that became enamored by their product and service. On the information marketing side of the business, those guys are better marketers, right? They're better marketers than traditional businesses, I believe. And that's why it's fun to kind of work with them. They'll pull it fast, right? They'll pull the plug fast on messaging to the marketplace of selling different types of products and services that just aren't being receptive, right? And they know their numbers. They look at it. Okay, here's what's going on. This is the conversion rate. And then they'll move. So tactics will always be there, right? The tools or the mechanisms to communicate will always be there. The key is really being grounded in who's my target audience, what's their problem that's I'm solving, how does my problem solve that vis-a-vis everything else, including status quo or not solving the problem, and how big of a problem is it? And I think that's the one part that a lot of people miss is how, on the hierarchy of all their problems, where does this rank? Is it number 1 or is it number 50? And if it's number 50, forget it, move on to something else.
Well, it's interesting. One of my kind of go-to books is a book called Traction. And there's 2 books called Traction. The one that I'm talking about is How Any Startup Can Achieve Explosive Growth. I believe that's the full title. And basically, the author lays it out that, there are essentially 17 different channels for marketing. And if you try to do all 17, so if you do content marketing and SEO and events and advertisement and billboards, or, if you try to do all these, it's a recipe for disaster and failure. Okay. But what you need to do is figure out what works, as fast as possible, and then throw a lot at it. And when that stops working, get on to the next thing. And I think that kind of aligns with what you're talking about there. Also, it's really important to do A/B testing. Is this resonating with the target audience? Is it not? And if we tweak the headline a little bit, will we get better results? And if you look at somebody like, and this is kind of in a different context, but the same theory. I've watched a podcast with Mr. Beast, the YouTube,
the YouTube guy.
And he talks about, for years, 2 or 3 years, he had this mastermind cohort of 3 or 4 of his friends, and they would be on Skype 8 hours a day talking about, if you tweak this thumbnail just like this, you'll get 10% more. If you change this word. And he says now he can look at a thumbnail, he can look at a video title and immediately tell you, is it going to be successful or not? And it's like, it's not just one thing, but he's got the kind of algorithm figured out to a certain degree. And I think a lot of that comes from experience and trying different things, but don't just say, oh, okay, what's our budget for all 17 channels of marketing? Figure out what you think is going to work and test. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
Well, I think you're spot on. And I think, ironically,
I like it when somebody says I'm spot on, but
they're spot on. And I think that's the mistake that everybody makes, right? And I think that's the mistake of sometimes marketers, right? And I'm not beating marketers up, but they're not schooled. And I was just having this conversation on another podcast where they may not be schooled in the strategy of it, right? They're more schooled in the tactics. Yeah. And so sometimes you go to a marketing agency and they'll say, well, what do you think, how should we position this company? They'll tell you your SEO ranking, not, here's the positioning in the marketplace that Trout Rice told us many years ago. And so you think about Mr. Beast, actually, they do a little snippet on him in the Jolt Effect. I don't know if you've read the Jolt Effect of how to move.
I'm halfway through it right now.
Yeah. So, and they talk about him. I'm going to blow it for you, but they talk about him and how he just dove into the minutia and did the work and just got better and better and better and better. Now he owned YouTube, right? He owned video. He didn't go to, let me figure out XYZ and 1, 2, 3 and Twitter and all that. Now, now they're absorbing short form videos and doing that. But I think what you said, and it was kind of a throwaway line, but people don't spend enough time on that, is they were on Skype for 8 hours. They were evaluating everything. And we don't do enough of that. And that's, we don't listen to calls on salespeople and find out, here's what's going back and forth and here's what's resonating. When I say this is what happens. No one is doing that analytical stuff of saying, I said this to the market. I said this to the prospect. They responded this way. I did it again. They responded this way. I did it again.
You got to change it up, man.
Yeah, right. And so how do you make those adjustments and how do you tweak that? And A/B testing, right? I'm big on A/B testing of scripts for salespeople because I'm schooled as a direct response guy, right? From my years with Dan, and my agency was a direct response agency. So what is the headline, right? And there's the old analogy of just changing one word in the headline could get you an 8% bump or a 10% bump, right? I was just reading something the other day. I want to test it, especially test it for emails going out. Adding in 2024, people are seeing a 10% response in headlines, right? Just by adding something in 24, right? In 2024, people are seeing a response rate. So it's being schooled in all that, being part of a group. I think too, what he said, it was him and, 3 other guys. I don't know if they were in the company with him or they were part of a different company or
they all had their own channels. The story that I saw, but yeah. And they all eventually became super successful.
Yeah. And so, but there's the other thing too. And I think, Mark, you hit on this. And it goes back to the one thing about Dan, right? The one thing about Bill, the one thing about the successful entrepreneurs, the one thing about the other people that we talked about. They're doing the hard work. Mm-hmm. They're doing the blocking and tackling work that a lot of people don't want to do. And I think we gloss over that as a society because everybody's an influencer. Everybody wants to get rich quick. Everybody wants to take a bunch of, whatever it is. Yeah. And I was just joking with somebody. I was talking to a copywriter that worked for the Agoras of the world, that worked for a lot of the big things. And he was saying, the 4-hour work week, nobody knew that Tim Ferriss worked 65 hours a week, if not 70 hours a week, right? But he glorified the 4-hour work week. Not taking anything away from Tim Ferriss. He's done a phenomenal job and has bring great value to the marketplace. But we don't want to do the hard work. And that's knowing the avatar or the ideal customer profile, listening to 100 sales calls, taking watching the video segment by segment by segment and making changes, poring over the data. Listen, I don't want to do it either, but you have to do it, right? Just like prospecting. Nobody wants the cold prospect, but sometimes you have to because you don't have the wherewithal or you don't have the economic investment to be able to do all the other stuff. And the quickest and fastest way to do is get a list and start making phone calls, right? And go on to the next thing and go on to the next thing. But I think that's the biggest driver. And if I think about those that were hugely successful, one is they were students. They poured over books. They poured over, webinars or YouTube videos or courses or whatever it was. They went back and knew the history, right? And read the history of not only marketing and sales, but their industry. But it's long, hard, grueling grunt work and nobody wants to do it sometimes, but you have to.
I totally agree with you. But it also pays off though. I mean, it's one of these things where you get compound interest on the things that you study and the things that you learn. It just takes a while, but the momentum builds up. I do like the thing about, reflecting on, when you go into a meeting and when you say something and you have to kind of be aware of how that's resonating with or not resonating with your audience. I've tried to do stand-up comedy quite a few times. And it's funny that, you can just change one word or just the timing a bit and almost all of a sudden everybody's laughing. And then if you change it another way, it's just dead. It's crickets, right? And so, you have to be aware of that. And I always tell the people that I work with on the sales side, I don't care if anybody makes a mistake. We all make mistakes. We're human beings. What I care about is when you walk out of that meeting, the first thing you should do is just think about what went bad, what didn't, what will I do next time to improve on that, and write it down if you need to, but make a note. Don't beat yourself up over it and say, oh God, I blew it. No. What did you learn? What will you do better next time? And if you do that and you're having 3 or 4 meetings a day over a few month period, you're going to improve massively.
It's interesting. You talk about stand-up comedy. I think a great Netflix documentary is Kevin Hart and the gentleman, his name is escaping me now. He got slapped at the Oscars.
Oh, Chris Rock.
Kirk Rock.
Chris Rock, yep.
That goes deep. It's amazing. They talk about, and they even bring Chappelle in, about how when they were breaking in, they were doing 13 shows a night, right?
Oh yeah.
And
you get
you
feedback always
you get
over,
that immediate
over.
that boom, 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 boom. And then they'd run across town and do another show, right? They would wait, and maybe they got 5 minutes on and they would hone their craft. And we just see them now selling out stadiums. But what does it look like, and how do they grow in that? One of the avatars I love for hiring for salespeople are people that came up through the arts, right? So people that were on stage, maybe they're theater majors, or they have some background of theater, or better yet, that they did improv, right? Because they're used to that immediate feedback, that yes and of building off of somebody and building, and they're used to taking notes, right? And rejection doesn't really get to them because the fact that they're used to being told no. So I think, every comedian should take every salesperson should take an improv class or two, or should try open mic nights on stand-up.
So I totally agree. And the improv, one of the things that teaches you is, you never shut something down. So if I ask you a question, you don't say no, you respond in a way that you kind of hit the ball back over the net to me, right? So that's, always passing it on. But when you talk about books from comedians, I read the Steve Martin book. I think it's called Born Standing Up. Oh my God. That guy, he worked for years and years. His first job in that field was like working at a magic shop in Disneyland. And he was doing tricks to try to get people to buy some of the stuff there. Then he started doing comedy, and nobody got his comedy. Because if you remember, he was very off the wall, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And he said, but I believed I was doing something that was different, but still funny. And it took him years. But after a while, it took off. And then he was filling stadiums. I mean, he was getting 50, 60,000 people out. At one time, he was the biggest comedian in the world, Yeah. But it's all that just years and years and years of work. So yeah, I think we're totally aligned there. Let me ask you, because, with your company now, it's sales performance team, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So, you're going in and you're offering, I think, consulting services, but you're also working as a fractional CRO or chief revenue officer. And a lot of organizations, they kind of, they might be okay to outsource maybe some of the HR or maybe different functions. But when it comes to sales, a lot of organizations want to kind of hold it tight. So tell me a little bit about the services that you're offering, and what's that conversation with companies that are considering to have you or another company come in and work as a CRO?
So, well, thanks for that. And you're probably right? So if you think about the business of outsourcing or fractional, right? The CFO is the OG, right?
Exactly.
The first person, HR, right? Maybe operations, right? But usually the sales part of it, they don't want that. The company came from a light bulb moment of what you and I first started talking about. I had the incubator of talking to hundreds, if not thousands, of small business owners, right? And they all could get marketing. They were in our sphere, so that's what we talked about, right? They all got marketing. They all loved marketing. But when they were truthful to themselves and then to us, they probably failed at hiring salespeople. They didn't know how to hire salespeople. They didn't know how to put processes and systems in place. They were the best salesperson because they were intimate with the product and services, right? So you could wake them up at 3:00 in the morning and they could do their pitch, right? And so they all struggled with that. And so we actually created, at the time, it was with GKIC, a seminar, if you will, and then a workshop where they paid us a lot of money, and they would come in and we would help them craft their ads on hiring salespeople. And we would craft their process of hiring. Then we would craft their sales process for them, right? So a proven and repeatable sales process is something that I talk about to this day. And we just honed it in. And I said to myself, well, they're paying us a lot of money to come in for a weekend. There's a business here, right? And it wasn't scalable, right? Because it was my time and I had other things I had to do for the company, right? So I couldn't spend all my time running that. So that was the genesis of sales performance team. I wrote the business plan on a business trip back from Milan. Yeah, I know life is hard, right? Coming back from Milan, but I wrote the plan and then I, just took it to the marketplace, and I've been blessed that the market's been very, very receptive. But you're right. And usually what happens is the founder doesn't want to deal. I deal with founder-owned companies, right, or small businesses. Yeah. And the founder realizes he's got a problem in sales, doesn't want to do the hard work of managing the sales team because he needs to be the founder or the CEO of the business. He strategically needs to grow the business. Maybe he's servicing clients, right? And so we kind of come in, create all the stuff that you need to have a really good sales process and sales system, from hiring to onboarding, to training, to coaching, to giving real-time feedback, to training and development, which is different, right? And then we just then put it on autopilot for them. We also say, listen, we don't have to be the long-term solution. We want to be a short-term solution. We love to get you so much sales that you could hire a full-time sales manager, if you will, or sales director or VP of sales. It shouldn't be at that level, right? For some of these companies, right? They go right to hiring a VP of sales. VP of sales is coming out of a large company. He doesn't understand the dynamics of a small business, right? So it's just a mission match. It's a good fit for us, and we could either stay on, or we create an environment where they hire their own person. They get, they have the systems and the processes in place. So, or they're testing a market, right? In 2020, a lot of the work that we did was companies were trying to go to market with maybe new products and services. And they didn't want to go out and hire a sales team, or didn't want to deploy the team that they had because they needed to kind of focus on the core business, especially when people are trying to figure their way out of COVID. And so that's kind of where we did a lot of shining of saying, let's rapidly bring a sales team in. We create the scripts, create the sales process, everything that you need. You could hire the sales team, right? Or you could now switch the product line over. Or if the product wasn't received by the marketplace, right, you could exit it, and you're exiting it with a company versus exiting it with individuals. Now you got to offboard them or all that good stuff. So we do a lot of work, right? Usually the core of our business is fractional sales leadership. We do some fractional business development work, and we do some fractional sales for the right fit, for the right company, if we think we could help them, and if we have sellers that are the right fit. But 90% of our revenue really comes from fractional sales leadership, and kind of we'll roll up our sleeves, right? So I know you'd said sales consulting. I kind of don't like that term, right? I don't, because of the fact that, listen, we all came from organizations where they hired consultants, and you got the binder in the days. Now it's all electronics, and you saw the PowerPoints and everything, but nobody had nobody rolled up their sleeves and got stuff done with the business owner. And that's kind of where we are. That's our sweet spot. So we're going to do some analysis. We'll create all the decks you want, but I'm also going to roll in, and I'm going to create the scripts, and I'm going to work with the team to listen and get the feedback and adjust the scripts and follow up campaigns, or let's call it the pre-education, right? And just work with them that way, and, get the KPIs in place and track the APIs on a daily basis and weekly basis, and find out what's going on with the sales team, getting that feedback that the founder just doesn't have the time to do. And quite frankly, the sales team is going to give real-time feedback to a sales leader, especially a fractional sales leader, versus the founder of the company, right? Because no one's going to tell anybody their baby's ugly. We come in and say, hey, listen, this is a problem. This is what the marketplace is saying, right? We listened to 42 calls. On 42 calls, 38 of them, we heard XYZ. This is something we have to adjust. So we love what we do. We're blessed that we have a good body of work. We're always, looking for more so we could help more people. We just really, really enjoy what we do. The market is growing, right? Because there's a lot of people that are, kind of maybe forced into this, right? So, but I don't, I'm all for it. I got an abundance mentality, right? If they could help more businesses, and allows founders to focus on what a founder should do or a CEO should do, which is going out and looking at the strategic direction, which is going out and building their bench, which is going out and giving massive reinvestment back to to their investors, whether their investors are themselves, right? Or their investors they took on institutional investors. So, our job is full. Every day we're fighting the battle with sales teams, across the United States.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I know that you work across a large number or variety of industries. And I'm wondering, a lot of times in order to sell something, you have to have some kind of industry specific knowledge or expertise. And you definitely need to understand the product, maybe the competition. But maybe if you go in at that fundamental level where you're like, we need to get, it doesn't matter what industry, there are some basic ABCs that need to get taken care of. And then we can put the product or industry specific kind of context on later. I mean, how do you address that?
Well, it goes back to similar how we started talking, right? It's like Dan. He had clients in so many different industries, and we get to see a lot of what works in different industries and bring that to the table. And so, if you think about we talk about the OG of fractional and the OG of sales training is Sandler, right? For lack of good or bad or indifferent, right? Sandler or Chandler, challenge or sale in that. There's a formation of a sales process, right? And you could then pick different parts of it that work or don't work for you. But if you don't have a sales process, then you're going to be sunk and you're not going to win the sale, or you're not going to win the amount of sales that you should win. And now at a certain point, you got to do really good discovery. Then from that discovery, if you're selling a SaaS product, which we do a lot of work in that space, now you got to go to demo. But everybody wants to run the demo, but we don't even know what the problems and the potential problems are. And by doing really good discovery, we're doing good opening, doing good discovery allows us to bring the product into place and having that conversation, right? Usually they have a good knowledge of who their competition is by the time they get to us. So we then could create, here's sell sheets against them, right? Here's what to look for. Here's what we do vis-a-vis. Sometimes you need an outside third party to kind of say, okay, well, what about this? Why is that important? Have you looked at this? So it's, I think it's a benefit, not a problem, because of the fact that we are in so many different. And I joke about this all the time, Mark. I know when a company is using a script, a playbook that just came from another company, right? Mm-hmm. The sales leader came from another company, or they hired a consultant, or they watched, or they, I like this email. Let's use this email. Or I like this LinkedIn outreach. It's the same because they're all in my inbox, right? Because I'm on everybody's list. So if you're from the industry ends up being very incestual. So everybody's kind of using the same playbook. So your sales process isn't sticking out. It's not different. And so what we bring in is kind of creating a bespoke sales process for you and for your team and for your offering. And most importantly, for the prospects that you're speaking to, that really moves the needle.
A lot of startups or new companies, the first thing they'll ask is like, okay, so do I need a CRM? Which CRM should I get? And then once you start going down that rabbit hole, you find out that there are all these other sales enablement tools for prospecting, and, ways to use AI for LinkedIn engagement or crafting emails or, queuing up or reminding you about certain follow-ups. Do you get asked to kind of advise in terms of what tools they should be looking at or investing in?
Usually, yes. Right. Mm-hmm. And usually, so because a lot of usually they have what I call marketing automation system. Mm-hmm. So they'll have an active campaign, right? Or they'll have MailChimp or something, right? That they're sending email marketing out, right? And those historically are not great on the sales side, right? So we have to then put something in place, whether it's pipe drive, if it's simple, right? So it's just like, gotta look at the economics, right? Because you don't want to build a tech stack that's now $1,000 a month per seat, right? To a startup, because now you're going to start draining their cash. And so the first thing we need to do is one is how are they conducting their sales calls, whether it's on Zoom. Okay, great. There's some great software on there now where you could do the notes from a Zoom meeting. The notes then do really good, post-event summary. So you could send your email. Here's exactly what we talked about. Here's what I heard, that type of thing. Olive is a really good one, but there's a lot of other ones out there now, right, that we really like. So how are they doing their calls? How is that, most importantly, that call, that information getting captured? Because the salesperson is never going to write the notes properly. Then how is that getting into the CRM, or how is that going into a Slack channel, whatever it wants to go? Are they making calls? I don't want them making calls on their personal cell phones, right? So we probably have to get them on a Ring Central or something like that. Or if they're on Zoom, we would need to get Zoom for phones, right? Then they have Zoom. If they're doing Zoom meetings, we want to then get them into, if they're using Sales Navigator, if not, they need to get Sales Navigator. Then we put them on an automation system for Sales Navigator, right? We try to do some education on LinkedIn Navigator too, for them, right? Because nobody really uses, and I'm spend a lot of time learning these things for them. The automation tools, Meet Alfred. There's a lot of other ones out there, right? So, but we just get a couple that we've learned don't break the bank, and are great for startups.
Awesome.
I've spent, it all starts with the right list, right? And you're going to go to questions. I'll let you go to the question, but listen, I'd jump out of this business in a million years if I could help people formulate the right lists, right? And I get to charge a heck of a lot more, right? So Zoom Info is very expensive for a lot of startups, right? So, we try Seamless AI, we tried Apollo, there's a lot of different sources for list building, and that's the most important thing too. And we, sometimes you have to do homegrown or scrape. So we have people in the Philippines or in Pakistan or Indonesia that do a lot of our work for us in creating, right, the highly targeted list. Goes back to how we started, right? It's really all about the market. Then you can worry about the messaging. Then you can worry about the tactics.
Yeah. No, I mean, and getting that target right in terms of, what is your ideal customer profile, and, which organization and who in the organization, and then the message, right? And that's huge. Let me change it up a bit. When it comes to marketing automation, or anybody in that space, marketing automation, or I would say sales enablement, if you wanted to put your investor hat on and you said, this is a company that is going to go places, do you have any top of mind?
Yeah, I got a couple. One I use, so I'm not going to give their name, because they're brand new. But they are doing some really great, if you want the name, I'll give it the name. I was just joking. Kula, Kula, and they are doing some really good stuff with AI, and cold email outreach. I love them. I love what they're doing. And I see the results because I use them for myself, right? And I put them, once I vet them on my own, then I put them, for the clients. Love that. I love Olive that I talked about, right? Yeah. That is taking the notes, but it's a sales driven, right? So it's not like Fathom, nothing wrong with Fathom, right? Or the other ones that are just taking notes. This is really, really driven, for sales. And so it learns. I have 3 or 4 different ones, and I haven't fully vetted them. But one of the things that we do is a lot of talk tracks, right? So we are looking at different AI solutions that could take calls, strip the call down, and look for commonalities of A, questions, and B, answers. And then therefore we could create the best practice of talk tracks for clients. Gong does this, right? But that's for enterprise. And, a lot of they don't sell to the SMBs, and I'm in the SMB market. So we have a couple of different solutions that we're testing. I'm part of a group of 90 plus fractional, chief sales officers. And so we try to find solutions that we could bring to our customers, and all of our customers are in the SMB market. So that's, I think, the most important thing out there. Somebody that could do a great job of your LinkedIn automation that doesn't get you in trouble, right? I don't want people's LinkedIn's to get shut down. The scraping of information and data, especially the scraping of LinkedIn, as well as just information out there. So find a good list. Email automation, Kula's does a great job. I'm using them. I highly recommend them. Have the conversations, right? Have good conversations. Teach them. So now I create an LMM, right? LMS system where you've got the best practices in there. You allow the team to kind of do some self-pacing. Those that want to will. If not, you're going to have to do that in your one-on-ones, right? And now get the talk tracks. And then, now you're off to the races as an organization.
Awesome. Well, hey, Nick, I mean, you've just packed a tremendous amount of information into, I think we're coming up close to an hour here.
Yeah.
But I filled up a whole page of notes here, and I'll have my morning ritual on Saturday mornings is to get up and reread everything that I that I had written down during the week, or that somebody had mentioned. So I've got my work cut out for me tomorrow morning. Let me ask you, do you have any closing thoughts, or if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Yeah. So, closing thoughts is one, thank you. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for having me on. Most importantly, I like the intellectual stimulation that these things provide, right? I got notes, dude. You saw me writing notes. I like to learn. I also like to educate and teach. I used to do some teaching on the college and the graduate level. I don't think I could do that in today's marketplace and today's education level, right? That's a different story, a different conversation. Don't want to, but this allows me to do that. Plus, when I was at GKIC in magnetic marketing, I did a lot of teaching, and it's fun. So I enjoy that. So thank you for this. Second off is thank you for serving the small market, small to mid-sized marketplace, right? And large and sales people, giving them tools, giving them podcasts like this, and really, I think there has to be good conversations about how do we have good processes and systems around sales and marketing, and how do we become better, right? Mm-hmm. And if I think about it, I broke my teeth as a VP of marketing in healthcare, right? Well, physicians did grand rounds. So they presented a case and they went deep on the case, and everybody learned from that. And I don't think we do enough of that as sales teams. I don't think we present a case, right, and go and learn from it deep enough. And so I love conversations like these, and I love podcasts like what you're doing here. If people want to get a hold of me, they could, LinkedIn is a great way. It's Nick Loise. They could go to our website. We actually have, a bonuses. We have content, right? It came from Dan. So they could go to salespack, PACK, salesperformanceteam.com. I've got a book there. I've got a checklist that they could use to audit their sales calls or their team sales calls. I've got a checklist of this is what we look for, right? So they could take a look at what we do and apply it to their business. If they want to have a conversation with me, or they just have a problem, just reach out to me at nick@salesperformanceteam.com, or IM me on LinkedIn. I live on LinkedIn, right? So it's kind of the space that I'm at. I know sometimes people try to reach out to me on Facebook. I don't do a good enough job of being in my Facebook app. I think that's more for family. So.
Yeah, I kind of try to keep those separate, but thank you for that. And again, thank you for being on the show. I will put links to your company, in the show notes here. Sure. And hey, I'd like to wish you an amazing, summer of 2024 that we're almost stepping into here, right?
We got Memorial Day. We got to get the boat into the water in 2 weeks. So that should be a lot of fun. We got a place up in Michigan. I'm in Chicago, as we started talking about. So, I can't wait. I wish you the best. I hope you have a good bike ride. And after you do your rereading of all your notes from the week, I like that ritual. Yeah. I'm starting that. I am the worst about that. That was worth it for me. I learned a lot, but I learned a lot with that. So thank you for that. Thanks, Mark.
Take care. Cheers.